Pirates didn't eat breakfast, they drank it. And what they poured down their throats at dawn would make your stomach turn faster than a ship in a hurricane. While you're sipping your morning coffee, these sea criminals were consuming something so disgusting it was actually illegal in most ports. But here's the twisted part. This revolting morning ritual is exactly what made them the most feared sailors on the seven seas. Forget everything you know about breakfast cereal and toast with jam. Pirates sailing the seven seas had something far worse waiting for them each morning. Hardtack. This wasn't bread in any sense we'd recognize today. Think of it as edible concrete that happened to be shaped like a biscuit. Hardtack was basically flour, water, and salt baked into rock-hard squares that could survive months at sea without spoiling. The recipe was simple, but eating it, that was another story entirely. These biscuits were so tough that sailors often broke their teeth trying to bite into them. Some pirates claimed you could use hardtack as armor in a pinch, and honestly, they probably weren't joking. But here's where things get really appetizing. After weeks floating around in damp ship storage, hardtack became a luxury hotel for weevils. These tiny black bugs would burrow deep inside every piece, laying eggs and making themselves completely at home. Pirates would crack open their breakfast biscuit only to find it crawling with little creatures. Delightful, right? Most sailors learned to tap their hardtack against the ship's rail before eating. The smart ones did this in daylight so they could see exactly how many bugs came tumbling out. The really experienced pirates just ate in darkness and pretended the extra crunch was normal. When hardtack proved too stubborn to chew, pirates got creative. They'd crush it into a coarse meal using whatever heavy object was handy. Others would soak their rations in grog, a mixture of rum and water, hoping the alcohol would soften the concrete-like texture and maybe kill off some of the wildlife living inside. Then there were the truly desperate times when food ran dangerously low. Pirates discovered that leftover hardtack pieces, the ones too bug-eaten or moldy to consume, made surprisingly decent buttons for their coats. Some even carved them into belt buckles. Nothing says fearsome sea criminal like accessories made from rejected breakfast food. The worst part about hardtack wasn't just the weevils or the jaw-breaking hardness. It was knowing that this would be your first meal of the day, every single day, for months on end. Pirates would wake up each morning dreading that familiar routine of tapping, checking for bugs, and trying to soften their ration enough to actually swallow it. Of course, hardtack was just the beginning of a pirate's breakfast nightmare. What they washed it down with was somehow even more questionable than bug-infested bread, involving barrels of water that had been sitting in ship storage for far too long. If you thought weevil-infested hardtack was bad, wait until you hear about the main course. Pirates relied heavily on salted beef for their protein, but calling it beef was being generous. After months at sea, this meat looked more like chunks of driftwood than anything that once walked on four legs. The salting process was supposed to preserve the meat, but it rarely worked as intended. Salt was expensive and often used sparingly, which meant the beef started rotting almost immediately. Within weeks of leaving port, the meat would develop a greenish tint and become covered in writhing maggots. The smell, absolutely horrific. Sailors could detect the stench of spoiled beef from several decks away. But here's the thing about pirates. They were incredibly resourceful when it came to survival. Rather than toss the maggoty meat overboard, they'd try to salvage it through cooking. Boiling was the preferred method since the heat would kill most of the bugs crawling around inside. Some crews would fry the beef in whatever fat they had available, hoping the high temperature would make it safe to eat. The weird part is that sometimes the beef became so impossibly hard that pirates couldn't even chew it. We're talking about meat that had the consistency of seasoned oak. Instead of forcing it down their throats, clever pirates would carve this rock-solid beef into useful tools. Makeshift handles, small hammers, even crude buttons, anything that required a durable material. Then there were the stomach problems. Salted beef, especially the spoiled variety, wreaked absolute havoc on pirate digestive systems. Crew members would spend hours doubled over with cramps, nausea, and worse. Some pirates developed chronic stomach issues that lasted their entire careers at sea. The irony wasn't lost on them. The food meant to keep them alive was slowly killing them from the inside. What made matters worse was the complete unpredictability of each piece. One chunk might be somewhat edible after boiling, while the next piece could be completely rotten through and through. Pirates never knew if their breakfast would provide nourishment or send them running to the ship's rail. Despite all these problems, salted beef remained a staple because alternatives were limited. Fresh meat spoiled even faster, and hunting opportunities were scarce during long ocean voyages. Pirates had to make do with what they had, even if it meant choking down leather-tough, bug-infested chunks of questionable protein. Speaking of questionable breakfast choices, pirates also had creative ways to turn their leftover hardtack into something resembling a morning meal. If you thought weevil-infested hardtack was bad enough on its own, pirates found an even more creative way to make it worse. They boiled it into porridge. Ship's biscuit porridge became the go-to breakfast when regular hardtack proved too tough to chew. Pirates would take those rock-hard biscuits and throw them into boiling water, hoping to create something edible. The problem? All those bugs crawling inside the biscuits got boiled right along with breakfast. Picture opening a pot of what should be morning porridge and finding dozens of tiny weevil bodies floating on top. Dead bugs bobbing around like little life rafts in a sea of mushy bread paste. The smell alone could make grown men gag, but hunger at sea makes people do desperate things. Then there's the texture issue. Ship's biscuit didn't break down cleanly when boiled. Instead, it turned into this slimy, lumpy mess that stuck to everything. Pirates described it as eating wet cement mixed with sawdust. The consistency was somewhere between oatmeal and paste, but with the delightful addition of bug parts throughout every spoonful. Smart pirates learned to add rum and sugar to mask the horror. The alcohol helped kill some of the bacteria, while sugar made the whole nightmare slightly more bearable. Some crews got creative with molasses or honey when they had it, turning their bug porridge into something that at least smelled sweet. But here's the weird part. Many pirates actually preferred this slimy mess to dry hardtack. At least porridge was soft enough to swallow without breaking teeth. Chewing regular hardtack for months could literally wear down a man's jaw muscles, so soggy biscuit mush seemed like luxury dining by comparison. The most desperate crews developed a twisted sense of optimism about their morning bug oatmeal. Finding extra weevils meant extra protein, they'd joke. Some sailors even claimed that biscuit porridge with lots of bugs was lucky. It meant they still had food when other ships were starving. Veterans learned tricks to make the experience less awful. Eating in dim light helped hide the bug parts. Drinking rum first numbed both taste buds and common sense. Adding salt helped cut through that slimy coating that stuck to their tongues. Morning porridge time became a test of mental strength as much as physical survival. Pirates who could stomach this revolving breakfast proved they had what it took for life at sea. But even bug porridge seemed appetizing compared to what pirates threw together when they got really desperate for variety. If hardtack and maggoty beef weren't bad enough, pirates had their own version of a mystery meat stew. They called it salmagundi, and honestly, nobody really knew what they'd find floating in their bowl. Here's how it worked. Whatever scraps of meat were lying around got tossed into one giant pot. Chicken from 3 weeks ago? In it goes. That questionable turtle meat from last Tuesday? Perfect. Random bits of pork, pigeon, maybe some eggs if they were lucky. The whole thing became a bizarre lottery where every spoonful was a surprise. But wait, it gets worse. Pirates weren't exactly food safety experts, so most of these ingredients were already going bad before they hit the pot. The smell alone could knock a grown man overboard. That's where the pirates got creative with their solution. They'd marinate everything in spiced wine first. Not because they were fancy chefs, but because they desperately needed to hide the taste of rot. Think of it as medieval Febreze, except you had to eat it. The wine masked the worst flavors while the spices fought a losing battle against whatever was growing on that meat. Then came the additions that really made salmagundi special. Anchovies, pickled herring, olives, and onions all joined the party. The logic was simple. If everything tastes terrible, maybe it'll all taste terrible together in a better way. Makes sense, right? The end result was incredibly oily and heavily seasoned. Pirates basically drowned their breakfast in enough salt, spices, and oil to hide anything suspicious. Some crew members claimed they could taste hints of mold, but the overwhelming flavor combination made it hard to tell what was intentional seasoning and what was accidental decay. What's really wild is that salmagundi became popular enough that pirates actually looked forward to it. When you're living on bug-infested hardtack and wooden beef, a mystery stew starts looking pretty good. At least it was warm, and the variety meant you might actually get some protein that didn't require a hammer to break apart. The beauty of salmagundi was its flexibility. Running low on chicken? Throw in more turtle? No more pork? That suspicious fish from yesterday works fine. Pirates turned food scarcity into culinary creativity, even if the results were questionable at best. Of course, eating random leftover scraps marinated in wine wasn't exactly a balanced diet. But before we judge their questionable stew choices too harshly, let's talk about their attempts at getting actual vegetables. If you thought weevil-infested hardtack was bad, wait until you hear about breakfast vegetables on a pirate ship. These weren't your grandmother's garden-fresh tomatoes and crisp lettuce. Pirates ate pickled cabbage that had been soaking in vinegar for months, turning it into a sour, soggy mess that could make your face scrunch up just from the smell. The pickling process kept vegetables from rotting completely, which sounds like a win until you realize what that actually meant. Onions became mushy and incredibly sharp-tasting after weeks in brine. Wild greens that pirates foraged at various ports got stuffed into barrels with so much salt and vinegar that they lost any resemblance to actual food. Makes sense, right? Better to eat something disgusting than nothing at all. But here's where it gets interesting. Pirates sometimes stumbled across tropical vegetables like plantains and cassava during their raids or port visits. These got mashed into a paste or boiled until they turned into something that looked like glue but tasted slightly better than their usual fare. The clever ones learned to mix these tropical finds with their pickled supplies, creating combinations that were equal parts creative and revolting. Then there's the stomach situation. While pickled vegetables prevented scurvy, a nasty disease that made your teeth fall out and your gums bleed, they also caused serious digestive problems. Pirates regularly dealt with stomach aches, cramping, and worse after their morning meals of sour, briny vegetables. The high salt content didn't help matters either, leaving many crew members feeling sick and dehydrated. Let's not forget that pirates weren't exactly picky shoppers. They grabbed whatever vegetables they could find, often taking wild celery, turnip greens, or something called tree cabbage. These plants got thrown into the same pickling barrels, regardless of how well they actually preserved or how terrible they tasted when morning came around. The weird part is that some pirates actually preferred this sour, harsh taste over the alternatives available on their ships. When your other breakfast options include maggoty meat and bug-filled hardtack, suddenly pickled vegetables start looking like a gourmet meal. Pirates develop strong stomachs out of pure necessity, learning to choke down foods that would make most people sick just by looking at them. Well, if you're starting to think pickled vegetables sound appetizing compared to everything else, you're not ready for what comes next. Pirates had another breakfast trick that involved catching their own protein straight from the ocean. While pirates dealt with rotting vegetables and maggoty meat, they occasionally struck gold in the form of fresh catches from the sea. Sea turtle became the ultimate breakfast prize when pirates managed to snag one. These massive creatures provided enough meat to feed an entire crew for days, and the taste was reportedly far better than anything else floating around in their food barrels. But here's where things get interesting. Pirates didn't just eat the turtle meat, they devoured everything. The eggs were considered a delicacy, often scrambled or boiled into a protein-packed morning feast. Some crews even figured out how to turn turtle blood into a type of pudding, mixed with whatever grain they had left. Waste nothing. Eat everything. That was the pirate way. Then there were the exotic fish that pirates pulled straight from tropical waters. Barracuda, grouper, and other colorful creatures that most sailors had never seen before ended up roasting over makeshift fires on deck. The problem? Nobody really knew which ones were safe to eat. Some fish caused violent stomach cramps, others made pirates hallucinate, and a few left crews with mysterious rashes covering their skin. Roasting became the preferred cooking method because it masked the smell when meat started going bad. Fresh fish spoiled within hours in the blazing Caribbean heat, so pirates learned to cook fast and eat faster. The weird part is that some of these exotic sea creatures actually tasted incredible when prepared correctly, a rare treat in their otherwise miserable diet. Seabirds also found their way onto the breakfast menu. Pirates would catch pelicans, gulls, and frigate birds, roasting them whole over open flames. Bird eggs were especially valuable since they packed serious nutrition and could be eaten raw if necessary. Some crews became expert egg hunters, raiding nests on remote islands during brief stops. The strangest catches involved creatures that modern diners would never consider food. Giant sea worms, strange crustaceans, and unidentifiable floating things all became breakfast when hunger struck hard enough. Pirates operating in tropical waters had access to ingredients that would make today's adventurous eaters think twice. These exotic meals represented both the best and worst of pirate dining. When luck struck and the catch was good, crews feasted like kings. When desperation set in, they ate things that would turn your stomach just thinking about them. Of course, even the freshest sea turtle couldn't solve their biggest nutritional challenge, getting enough filling, long-lasting food to keep an entire crew fed for weeks at sea. After choking down rotting turtle meat and whatever sea creatures they could catch, pirates still needed something to fill their bellies. That's where the real survival foods came in. Dried beans and whatever grain mash they could scrape together. Dried beans became a pirate's best friend at sea. Well, maybe not exactly a friend, since friendship usually doesn't involve this much stomach cramping. These weren't your grandmother's Sunday dinner beans either. Pirates loaded their ships with dried peas, chickpeas, lentils, and any other legumes that wouldn't spoil during months of ocean travel. The beans got tossed into massive pots and boiled until they were soft enough to chew without breaking teeth. But here's where things got creative in the worst possible way. Pirates mixed oats, bran, and whatever flour hadn't gone moldy into something called burgoo. Sounds fancy, right? Wrong. Burgoo was basically edible glue that happened to contain nutrients. The grain mash came out gluey, bland, and about as appetizing as wet cardboard. Pirates would flavor this mess with leftover lard, rancid oil, or whatever fat they could find floating around the ship's kitchen. Then, there's the storage problem nobody talks about. Those beans might last for months, but they didn't stay perfect. Sitting inside old wooden barrels for weeks made them hard and gritty. Pirates would bite down expecting a normal bean and instead get something that felt like chewing on tiny rocks. The barrels themselves added their own special flavors, mostly wood rot and whatever else had been stored in there before. Smart pirates learned a few tricks, though. When they could find it, coconut milk made everything taste slightly less terrible. Dried maize got mixed in to stretch meals over more days, which was crucial when you didn't know where your next meal was coming from. Some crews got lucky enough to trade for tropical ingredients that actually improved their morning mash. The weird part is that this bean and grain combo actually kept pirates alive better than most of their other food options. Beans provided protein that their bodies desperately needed, while grains gave them energy for hauling ropes and fighting battles. Sure, it tasted like eating paste, but paste that wouldn't kill you was considered a victory at sea. Of course, even the most filling breakfast meant nothing without something to wash it down, and that's where pirates faced their most dangerous choice of the day. When you think about pirate breakfasts, food gets all the attention. But what about drinks? Well, that's where things get really nasty. Pirates faced a brutal choice every morning. Drink contaminated water that could kill you, or start the day with alcohol that might save your life. Most chose the booze. Smart move, actually. Fresh water aboard pirate ships turned into a science experiment nobody wanted to study. Within weeks at sea, barrels of clean drinking water transformed into green, slimy soup crawling with bacteria. The smell alone could knock a grown man overboard. Tiny worms wiggled through the murky liquid, and a thick film covered the surface like pond scum. But here's the weird part. Rum actually became medicine. Pirates discovered that mixing their rotting water with strong rum created something called grog. The alcohol killed off enough germs to make the mixture semi-safe to drink. Problem solved, right? Not exactly. Starting your day with a hefty dose of rum meant most pirates were tipsy before noon. Imagine trying to climb rigging or handle swords when you're already buzzed from breakfast drinks. Many crews stumbled around their ships in an alcohol-fueled haze, but they stayed alive longer than those who risked straight water. The grog recipe was simple, but potent. Take 4 parts disgusting barrel water, add 1 part strong rum, maybe throw in some lime juice if you had it. Stir and pray your stomach could handle it. Some pirates got creative, adding molasses or sugar to mask the horrible taste of their morning cocktail. Then there's the long-term problem nobody talked about. Drinking grog every morning led to serious dehydration, even though pirates thought they were getting enough fluids. The rum actually made their bodies lose more water than they gained. Crews often suffered from constant headaches, fatigue, and confusion. Not exactly ideal when you're trying to raid merchant ships or navigate treacherous waters. Disease spread faster when pirates relied too heavily on contaminated grog. Scurvy, dysentery, and fever ran rampant through crews who couldn't find fresh water sources. Many pirates died not from sword fights or cannon battles, but from the slow poison of their daily breakfast drink. The irony cuts deep. Pirates chose between quick death from bad water or slow death from constant alcohol consumption. And speaking of tough choices, these breakfast nightmares were just the beginning. Pirates had to survive entire days on food that would horrify modern diners, proving that life on the high seas demanded an iron stomach and nerves of steel.